Hi, I am CJ Devgun, and welcome to another edition of Breaking Barriers, where my goal is to provide you with proven tools to help you transform your business. We are living in times where business, as usual, is not sustainable. Because new disruptors are arriving every day, therefore, you too must reinvent and break barriers that are holding you back. If you are struggling to grow your business, check out my website at cjdevgun.com and learn about my consulting and coaching services, and let's talk. Welcome to another episode in our series on how to transform your organization. Our guest today is Christina Marsh. Chris is a Fortune 500 marketing leader and author of Personal Branding Playbook, strategy, coaching, and planning system. Following her true purpose, Chris left the corporate world in 2013 to work towards her vision of enabling others to reach their full potential. She now leverages her experience to help entrepreneurs and family businesses break through uncertainty and build strategies for success. You can learn more about Chris and her free business resources at chrismarshconsulting.com. Without further ado, let me welcome Chris. Good morning, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, CJ. I hate to back you up, CJ, because I know you spent time on that intro, but if you wouldn't mind, the title of the publication that I have is Personal Brand Playbook. And I think you said Personal Branding Playbook. I just want to make sure that that's really clear for everyone.
Thank you very much for correcting me. Yeah, Personal Brand Playbook. So I understand I'm in Toronto. You are in Michigan. We are having a major snowstorm, having all kind of ugly weather that Mother Nature can throw at us. We're having snow, which is going to turn into sleet and then freezing rain. How's weather like in Michigan? I'm assuming not much different.
It's exactly the same. Yes, we have moved from sub-zero temperatures just a couple of days ago. Now it's warmed up into the 20s, which is still cold, and that's Fahrenheit. And we did have the snowstorm come in last night. So right now we're dealing with snow being dumped on us, and now freezing rain is moving in today. So it's a great day to be an entrepreneur and be able to work from home, so I don't have to be out on the road during the cold.
I agree. Okay, so moving along, let's talk about some of your experiences. Let's dive directly into our main subject of transformation. So tell our listeners, what kind of transformations have you been on? And our focus is more corporate transformations, more so than individual transformations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so prior to beginning my private consulting work, which I've been doing since 2013, I spent 14 years with a global Fortune 500 chemical corporation. And throughout the time that I spent there, I worked in global marketing communications. From there, I moved into the role of being the global marketing process leader. And in a nutshell, what that meant is that I was responsible for figuring out, as a corporation enterprise-wide, how do we do marketing more effectively? And so a lot of that work centered around big change management and leading large projects from the beginning of creating a really clear vision for everyone all the way through implementation. So the biggest change management that I did was in that role. And then in my final role with the organization, I was the North America market leader for one of the key business units. So in terms of the types of change management projects that I led, they ranged from the very technical, because it was a technical company, to organizational effectiveness projects.
Excellent. So What factors do you think are most influential in deciding the fate of these large transformative programs? Because there's a study done by Harvard Business Review that indicated that 70% of these transformational projects fail in meeting the mark, i.e., the original goals or benefits that were identified are never met. So, so what factors do you think, in your experience, were instrumental in helping you being successful in those change management programs?
The biggest mistake that I see organizations make when they're beginning a change management program or a project is that they don't have a clear line of accountability in terms of one person needing to have ultimate ownership of making certain that the change and or the project are completed and completed successfully. So a lot of times in these large organizations, we have project sponsors who are typically at the executive level, and they've generally been assigned to be a sponsor on these projects. Then we have project teams or committees that are brought together, and so these are typically cross-functional people that are brought together to a table to work on a project. And then you'll have a project manager that really is responsible for coordinating resources and measuring timelines and keeping things on track. Most often, though, what I see missed is that one person has the ultimate accountability and ownership to make sure that it's done. And that owner needs to have an incentive themselves for believing in the project, believing that it needs to be done, caring that it's done, but at the end of the day, also being held accountable that it's completed and having the authority and the resources that they need to be able to make sure that the project or the program is completed. So when you don't assign that ultimate, I would call it the buck stops here, ownership, then you have a lot of people with good intentions, but I can see programs or change management initiatives fizzling out as everyone else gets distracted. The cast of characters, I'll say, in this work that's happening, they get distracted or pulled away by other things, and there's not one person there who has that ultimate accountability of making sure that it gets done.
Excellent point. So takeaway for our listeners is accountability. And on other shows, we talk about governance. And end of the day, you must have a clear RACI chart. And RACI stands for responsibility, accountability, informed, and consult. So all the key activities that you have, you must identify who are the individuals who are accountable for making sure that that activity gets done, who are the individuals who are responsible for making sure that those activities get done, who are the individuals you need to inform that those activities are done, who are the individuals you need to consult when doing those activities. Now, you can have multiple people in all the boxes except one, and Chris's point is that accountability box cannot have more than one person because the buck needs to come and stop at some place, and that's very, very important. Excellent point, Chris. So that's the governance of plan. So what else are critical components of change management initiatives?
Well, there's this question of how do you prioritize which projects are going to be worked on, right? Because even in large organizations, at a certain point, resources are finite. And so there's this question of how do you select which projects you are going to fund and you're going to put your resources behind. So this is another place where I see confusion within organizations. And in order to be able to select those projects, those programs, the first thing that you need to know is what is your selection criteria? And so now when I'm consulting with organizations and we're working through strategic planning as an example, and you get to a point with strategic planning where you also need to prioritize and decide what are those programs and what are those initiatives that you're going to put into your plan, right? So in order to do that, you need to know what your selection criteria is. And even in large organizations, I find that there's often confusion with that. What are the key decision points that are going to drive you to decide whether or not you're going to invest? And those are things like determining, is this feasible? Is it viable? Is this attractive to us in terms of what we would expect the return on it to be? And so once you start lining up what those key decision points are, then you can build what's often called this stage gate process. And usually a stage gate process will have anywhere between 5 and 10 maybe decision points, although more typically 5 to 7. But it's those decision points that these projects hit as you're considering, first of all, whether or not it's going to be funded, which would be the first gates in that stage gate process, if you will. And then moving forward, as you continue through the project, those additional decision points, even as the project has been launched, you need to be able to reach some critical points where you assess and decide, is this project still valuable? Has new information come in that would cause us to course correct? So that you're monitoring that change management process all the way through to the end, so that you don't get to the end and realize that it didn't do what you expected it to do. And there are a lot of reasons why it can go off course. So number one is know your decision criteria of how you're going to decide what you're going to fund. Part of that also then is to understand as an organization, so that you can inform those decision points, what is your risk tolerance as an organization? There's a certain level of risk involved with every business decision that we make. If not, you would have 100% certainty and everything would be a success. So we know it doesn't work that way. So understanding what your level of risk tolerance is as well, and by the way, having a process in place to mitigate as much risk as you can. So understanding as an organization, what is our process for understanding and mitigating risk? How do we determine, first of all, what we don't know, what our comfort level is with that unknown, and then how do we fill in the gaps with that knowledge? What's the process for us to fill in the gaps to mitigate that risk? And then at what point are we comfortable enough that we're going to move forward? And then I would say a third point to that with selecting and funding projects is I often work with organizations and I will ask them, well, what is your floor number or what is your threshold for what this return on investment needs to be potentially of this project, of this program, for you to move forward with it? And I'm often surprised that people don't know the answer to that. And as an organization, you need to understand what your minimum return on investment is for a project or a program for you to invest in it. So in order to select the projects that you're going to fund or these change management programs that you're going to fund, you have to know your decision point criteria before you go into it, understanding how you're going to make that decision. You have to understand what your risk tolerance is as an organization, and then you have to know what your minimum return on investment expectation is so that you can make that decision in an informed way.
Excellent. So it's a very, very informed conversation. So I will break it down for our listeners. So there are three main topics that Chris talked about. Number one, you need to have an established process for portfolio management. So if you're a large organization, you must have a set selection criteria for initiatives that you will take on. I heard or read somewhere an interesting saying that I don't take projects that I want to finish. I take on projects that I must finish.
Exactly.
So that is very important. And when you're doing a selection of your project, Chris mentioned number of different criteria. Your financial ROI is one of the criteria. Your alignment to your strategy could be another criteria. How clearly defined the scope statement for that project is could be another criteria. Your market pressures and urgencies could be a different criteria. And you need to put weights on all these criteria and then come up with a weighted average. So for example, financial numbers for some organizations could be on scale of 1 to 5. In some organizations, financial number could be 3, and urgency to regulations could be 5. And you need to decide for your own organization what weighted criteria you need to decide, but you need to be transparent across your company so every business sponsor who's championing a project understand why their project got selected or did not get selected. And risk tolerance is also one of the criteria. Second point that Chris mentioned is having a gate reviews. Very, very important. You know, we lived in a very fast-paced environment, and market dynamics are changing. Individuals and roles are changing. So you need to make sure that when you embark on a large program, at every phase, when the phase ends, you need to go back and ensure that is this program still on track to deliver the benefits that we have originally identified for it. And it is very important. And you need to have a governance process, and we may or may not get into that today. But that committee needs to look at various parameters, just like at the selection time, we look through those parameters and say, are we on track? And third point, again, very, very important is benefit realization. Is your program, what tangible benefits is it giving? Financial benefits, regulatory benefits, tangible or not? You need to make sure that they are identified, and you need to have some kind of matrix that you can measure them at every stage. So everything can be quantifiable. Did I miss anything, Chris?
No, I mean, that's perfect. And speaking of objectives, that's another mistake that I see organizations make, that they begin a project without first fully understanding what their specific and measurable objectives are for the program. What do they want the ultimate outcome to be? And they also need to understand, how are you going to measure that, right? So we think sometimes that we're setting objectives, but we haven't gone so far as understanding how are we going to measure that at the end to understand whether or not it was a success. And this is why that's really important. You need to have mechanisms in place before you start the project to capture that information that you want to measure. So that's step one, so that at the end of this, you have the mechanisms to be able to measure the things you want to measure. But the other reason it's really important is that very often, in order for us to determine whether we have made the progress that we wanted to make with the change management initiative, we need to benchmark where we started, because otherwise, what are we comparing it to? And so that's the other key to needing to set specific and measurable objectives in advance, is because you need to know what do we need to benchmark before we even begin this project, so that we know the starting point and therefore we know how much progress we made at the end. So very often there's a project that needs to occur before you start to do that benchmark project.
We are getting to the bottom of the hour, Chris. I want to give a few minutes to you to talk about what you are doing now in your new avatar, and how can our listeners benefit from you, and what kind of services or coaching that you can provide to them.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So since 2013, I've been focused on coaching and consulting for entrepreneurs and also family businesses. And so one thing that's been interesting for me is realizing that family business owners don't generally define themselves as entrepreneurs. But individuals like you and I, who are coaches and consultants, we tend to call ourselves entrepreneurs. And the reason for that, I found, is that family business owners tend to define themselves as a larger part of the whole organization of this family business. So that's the differentiation between entrepreneurs and family businesses. So a lot of my time now is spent helping family businesses and entrepreneurs with strategic planning. So typically they're at some transition point. Sometimes that transition point is that they're getting ready to transition from one generation to the next in the family business ownership structure. On the other side, on the entrepreneur side, a lot of times it's just that they've reached a level of success. They're ready to level up. But in either case, at that transition point, they're trying to figure out what's next, and they want to get clarity on that. And a really good strategic plan is what is the starting point for them to be able to do that, to have that very well defined, clearly defined vision of exactly where they want to go, to be able to then dig in and do the analysis of determining and having a clear picture of where they are now, and then helping them fill in the gap in between of where they are and where they want to be with situational analysis, clear and measurable objectives, strategy sets for success, and then breaking that down even into action plans. So that's where a lot of my work is centered right now, is strategic planning. And then beyond that, staying engaged to help them through the implementation process with things like we just talked about today. How do they set themselves up for success? How do they make sure that these things are going to work? And then also, frankly, just a lot of the experiences that I've had in the Fortune 500 world, bringing those tools and templates and solutions to them and helping them scale them inside of their business so that they can implement their strategies successfully. So in terms of how people can reach me, it's chrismarshconsulting.com. Chris is KrisMarsh. So there are some free resources available on my site as well, with podcasts and videos and free informational downloads that I would love to have people access as they need them.
I appreciate that, Chris. I think in the digital economy that we work in, there is those barriers to entries coming down, and there is a very little distinction between a large enterprise and a small enterprise. So it's a great work that you're doing, providing all the tools that large businesses have been using for decades to smaller businesses. I wish you all the very best.
That is it for today. Thank you for listening. I would love to hear from you and help out in any way I can. You can reach me at cjdevgun.com. If you like our show, please subscribe, leave a rating and a review for us. Let's go out and break barriers and generate new possibilities. Until next time, adios, ciao, and goodbye.